Good day and welcome. We are welcoming Rudi Swanepoel today. He is working at the Andrew Murray Church in Johannesburg. Welcome, Rudi, and we are looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, Emerentia, and it's a privilege to be part of this.
Thank you. Please tell us more about yourself.
Emerentia, I'm a full-time pastor at the Andrew Murray congregation in Johannesburg. We are part of the Dutch Reformed Church, but we are the English congregation of the Dutch Reformed Church in Johannesburg. And we are not a big congregation. It's a small group of people, small community of faith, but that also has its advantages. I think one of the advantages being that we can really sort of know each other. But with the pandemic, you and I spoke in an informal conversation. The boundaries of the congregation have changed quite a bit. People are engaging on social media and on YouTube, etc. But yeah, I've been here for 12 years now. I am particularly interested in systematic theology, which is the field where we really struggle or wrestle with what it is that we believe. And it's one of the interesting things that the pandemic has brought about, I think, a sort of a re-looking of what we believe. I see on social media and in the printed media and everywhere how believers or just people in general are struggling with what is happening and how we are trying to almost combat the pandemic by using prayer, for example. And we are discovering that we cannot control the world through prayer. As much as prayer has significance and meaning in our lives, we cannot sort of use our faith or our beliefs as a sort of magical tool to change what is happening. So I'm very, very interested in what we believe, how we believe, and how that affects our interaction with the world and with ourselves, and obviously with one another as well. Mm-hmm. I've been married for 23 years to Karina. She's a physiotherapist. She's the wisest person I know. She is the person with the most depth that I've ever met. And we have 4 children aging between 20 and 12. So our life is quite busy, but I won't change it for anything.
That sounds wonderful. Sounds like a full life and a meaningful life. I'm interested as well in what you are saying about the systematic theology. Is that the word?
Yes.
And I can just testify and say that in this pandemic and with what has been happening in South Africa, I was also challenged by the idea of sometimes things are just bigger than life. And it really, really challenged me to think about my faith and how I believe, and actually confirmed that we need God, and to think about how He is still sovereign and still in charge, or what is the correct word to say, but He's still with us, and we need to pray in a new way, I think, or new things perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is just about what you've just said is just about the heart of what this sort of readjustment in terms of what we believe is. And it has everything to do with presence. So, before the pandemic, for example, at Christmas time or at Easter, we would be very comfortable with saying that the other name that was given to Jesus, for example, was Emmanuel, God with us. But it was sort of on a, not really a superficial level, but it was on a fairly superficial level. It was sort of easy to say that because many of us, not all of us, but many of us were living lives of relative ease, relative comfort. But I want to just interrupt quickly before we continue speaking about presence and how we believe and how that has changed. I just want to say, that I think part of our sense making in this time is to understand that because of the pandemic, there has entered a new almost level of adversity into all our lives. So before, use an analogy, and I mean, this is probably a pathetic or a poor analogy, given, the people who are probably listening to this or watching this. But, if the pandemic has brought about sort of chronic pain in all of our legs, and all our legs, are aching simultaneously, then that is a new thing. What we had before was, I would have a sore thumb or, a tennis elbow or a chronic headache or whatever. But now all of a sudden there's something new that we are all struggling with, that we are all fighting. And obviously it impacts our psyche, it impacts our emotional state, it impacts our faith, it impacts every single possible aspect of our lives. I mean, it impacts our social interaction. I mean, we are, for the rest of our lives, we are probably going to still struggle to come to terms with this. What has exactly happened since we were not able to touch or to hug at funerals? I mean, I was at the memorial service on Saturday, and I was again so aware of how difficult it is, how almost impossible it is to deal with this in this time. So, there's a certain level of adversity that we are all dealing with on a daily basis and that we have dealt with in times gone by. But then since March 2020, there has been this additional layer of adversity. And I mean, it's now 18 months down the line, and we are all still trying to come to terms with what that is, what it means, how it impacts us, how it influences us. But to get back to the systematic theology, so systematic theology is a field within, it's a discipline within theology, so it's an academic discipline, but it really, in the old days, it was called dogmatics, and unfortunately that has got quite a bad name because, to be dogmatic about something sounds wrong. It sounds sort of uncomfortable to many people. Afrikaans daarvoor is dogmatiek gewees. Iemand soos Johan Heinz was professor in dogmatiek. But systematic theology or systematic theology is basically the way we believe. And to get back to your remark, Emerentia, it has to do, I think many of our reorientation has to do with the question, is God absent when my life falls apart? Is God absent when I feel out of sorts? Is God absent when I've run out of plans or options? Is God absent when my body aches? And what that means. So I think for the first time in our lifetime collectively, we now need to take that notion of God being Emmanuel, God as revealed in Christ, Emmanuel, God with us. We need to take that notion to a whole other level and say, if he himself suffered to the degree that he suffered, then what does that mean when I suffer? So then I think the almost the logical conclusion is to say that God is not absent when I suffer. God is in a unique way present when adversity pays a visit to my life or my home or my body. And that's a massive adjustment, I think. And I think as painful as it is, it is equally good to make that adjustment, because it takes us all to a deeper level of faith. It's much deeper than believing that God is with me when I post a picture on social media. I always use the example of a wine glass. Many people do this. I'm probably myself. I've probably also done this. You are on a holiday, or you are away, whether in the bush or at the sea or whatever, and you take this beautiful picture of your wine glass at sunset, and there's, the condensation is there on the glass, and you use the caption, you say, we are having the most wonderful time, #so blessed.
Mm.
So obviously that comes from a very good place. It comes from a place of gratitude. It comes from a place of enjoyment. I'm appreciating this moment. But behind that is a rather problematic belief. And the problem is that God is blessing me when I'm able to take a picture in a position of comfort of my wine glass while on holiday. So what about my hospital bed? What about my aches? What about my mental torment? Where is God there? So the sages, the wise people throughout the years have said that if you are able to say God is good and God is present in the midst of adversity, then it sort of supplements that other side. So the one side is, the sort of obvious blessing, but the other side of that is the less obvious blessing. And that blessing the latter blessing is only revealed in the aching, broken, suffering body of Christ. So I often think in this time that, for Christians at least, and I'm not presuming that everybody who watches this is a person of the Christian faith or a follower of the Christian faith. But having said that, I couldn't help but time and time again return to this awareness that the suffering Christ is more in the center of many people's lives and almost in the center of everything that is than perhaps ever before in our lifetime.
Yes, and the idea that comes up for me is that when we are suffering, we need to be open, and I'm saying this with much hesitation actually, so we need to be open to the moment, to be present in that moment of suffering as well, to tolerate that moment, to allow that moment in, and to, in that moment, search for God and His presence and His total understanding of suffering, because He has also suffered, and to meet Him there.
Exactly. And I wonder, Marisha, I mean, people like yourself are, you are the experts when it comes to mental well-being, etc., and general well-being. But I do wonder what that does to us if we are willing to embrace those feelings that we would normally want to avoid. So, I think the social media has brought about so many good things, but the downside is this, exactly what I referred to earlier. I scroll and I go, oh, well, everybody else is having a good time, and every now and again somebody is honest enough or brave enough to say that they're not coping or whatever. But we all try to present this happy picture to the people who follow us and to the outside world. And all along we are sitting with rather complicated, complex feelings, conflicted feelings often. Why am I not able to feel more grateful that I'm at least in a home and that there's food in my fridge, and that my wife didn't pass away when she had COVID. You know, I could be so much worse off. But what you are saying is that we really help ourselves when we cultivate the ability to be honest about what is happening, to be honest about those dark feelings that we are having. But the problem is that our human nature, does not want to go there. We are afraid to go there. We are afraid. I mean, I often hear people, again, at funerals or memorial service, I hear phrases like, I don't want to start crying because I don't want to collapse. Mm. But in all honesty, when our loved ones die, the collapse has already happened. Mm. So if I cry for 10 minutes at a funeral because I cannot control myself, that is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of humanity. It's a sign of being, as you said, fully present. It's a sign of honesty. It's a sign of authenticity. I'm not faking it. I'm not going to pretend that it's not as bad as it is. So obviously it's very complicated, but I think part of the invitation of this time is to say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid for what is difficult. Don't be afraid for what seems unbearably hard. I can't remember the context or where or when, but somebody said that you cannot fall further than the floor. Mm-hmm. So, and to me, this is often, it's something that I actually did in the past 18 months. I would, at times when I felt completely despondent, completely out of sorts, I would just go and simply lie on the floor and just, and in the process also almost just ground yourself. Mm. There's something liberating in that posture of just lying on the floor and just touching, whether it's grass or whether it's this wooden floor that I'm sitting on. There's something grounding in that, because it's a defense mechanism to sort of want to escape from everything. It's also, and it's normal to want to escape or run away, but we can't run. Where are we going to run to? We have nowhere to run. So at times I've really just, and I want to say this, you didn't ask me about this at all, but I've, for the past 18 months, I mean, regardless of how long I still have to live or how I will look back at this time, but I have not cried this much in my life ever before. There's just been so much emotion, and so everything and everybody has been so charged with emotion that we couldn't shield ourselves off from that. But simultaneously, it makes us so tired. But again, then on another level, it also heals us. It's also such a healing thing. So, I'm saying, maybe I'm preaching to myself, saying, don't be afraid to fall apart. Don't be afraid.
Sure. That's already such a wonderful and meaningful message. And I wonder if you can link it in some way to what you see is presence and what presence means to you.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I have to say that in the last sort of 18 months, tangible objects have become almost new to me. And I can think of at least two tangible objects. The one is candles, a candle, lighting a candle. I was about 5 weeks ago. We did a memorial for one of the teachers at one of the children's schools, and her colleague, the teacher who passed away, her closest colleague, when she paid a tribute to this teacher, she brought along a candle that was lit. And she said for as long as her friend was in ICU, she lit this candle every single day. And, this was how she prayed. This was how she grounded herself. This was how she stayed present in her, sort of connection with her friend and colleague. So before, we used to light candles in church for, Easter, or as a sort of central Christ candle. And it was sort of in passing, you do it quickly and you focus on that for a few seconds and then you move on again. But time and time again now, I would light a candle or more than one candle with a very specific intention, and that is to be present and to bring myself back to this presence. And in the candle's case, the symbolism obviously is that darkness can never overcome light. It is just physically impossible. It's a given impossibility. As dark as it may feel, light will always conquer. And that's, of course, a spiritual and a biblical truth. The other tangible object, and it's been like that for a long time, is bread. And I, again, back to the sort of church environment and the liturgical act of celebrating communion and the sacrament of Holy Communion. Before, communion would almost be like a routine thing to just do and get over with. And I've had a very strong sense that since the start of the pandemic, with people sitting in their own homes, breaking either a cracker or a piece of bread. At times here, we didn't have bread and I had to run to church. So it was either, at times, a rice cake worked very well, a small little rice cake. I used a rice cake and that tiny bit of grape juice or wine. I've heard of people who also didn't have either grape juice or wine. They've used other replacements. And I don't mean this in a light way. I mean it in a deep way, to say that that symbolism of a piece of bread or a cracker or a glass of juice or wine, that has brought a few or more than a few new dimensions to the presence of God, because we were not able to be physically present. We weren't able to break the bread. So I'm part of one of my hobbies is to bake bread. So I'm not always. I don't always bake our own bread at home, but it's definitely a big hobby and a big interest of mine. So the whole process of preparing bread and baking bread has taken on numerous new dimensions. So I'm using these examples to say that I think we in this time we have all sort of acquired new ways or new habits of being present, or reminding ourselves that we are not alone. Level 5 lockdown was a very, very challenging time, and my heart literally broke every time I thought of the elderly, the people who could not understand why this is happening and what exactly is happening and why they're not seeing their loved ones. It is almost unbearable to recall the people who have died alone, not knowing that interaction in the car park was the last time they would physically see their loved ones. In the midst of all of that, I think we all looked for almost practical ways to remind ourselves that we are not alone, that God has not forgotten us, and that that as long as we possibly can, we need to hang on and hold on to one another and not lose hope.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think what I get from this is that we as nurses can sometimes use something like a ritual or a symbol or something that's very meaningful and precious to us to help us to be present in the moment and to be authentic in the moment, to notice our own emotions and our own experience, but also then to notice the patient and what they are going through and what they are experiencing. Acknowledging that moment through something that's very meaningful for us and grounding us.
Absolutely. Emerentia, while you are saying that, something is coming to mind, and that is the reality that what you do, and what every single nurse, person who nurses somebody else, what you do is really, really holy work. It is, you have the ability to be present there at the heart, at the crucible of literally of life and death and healing and sorrow. And so you are, you are all standing on holy ground on a daily basis. And, I don't want to include, pastoral or spiritual work even in this remark. I just simply want to say that you are the ones doing the real holy work.
Yes, it's really a gift to be there in that moment. And from my side, I would like to encourage nurses to just be aware that we see the work that you are doing and we appreciate that. And also to please to honor that holy moment and to see it as something that you can make a real difference in the patient's life. So I wonder if you have an encouraging word for nurses.
Sure. I don't think you can ever be thanked enough. I don't think that there's enough money or resources in the world to thank you for what you do. Maybe just this idea that, or this thing, and maybe you are doing this already, that if it feels too much for you, and if you've lost too many people, then just the idea of surrendering and remembering that we are not carrying this. For my own sanity, I've had to sort of remind myself that I'm not carrying somebody else's sorrow or their pain. It sounds wrong because we think that we should walk alongside and carry. But what I can do, I cannot carry 100, 200, 300, 400 people's sorrow. That is not possible. Mm-hmm. But what I can do is I can walk alongside. That I can do. I can say to myself and to you, I can walk alongside you. I can walk next to you. I can walk with you. And perhaps in your work as a person who nurses others, maybe when it gets too much, you can say to yourself, I cannot carry this. I'm not able to. It is too much. It's too heavy. But I can walk with you.
Thank you. That's very meaningful. I want to close our conversation by asking you to tell more about the projects that you are involved with, and perhaps if someone is interested in contacting you and having a conversation, maybe where they can contact you.
Yes. Marisha, what I'm truly passionate about is anything that brings people together. The one at the moment, it sounds like, you know, secret, but it's not. The one thing that we are busy with at the moment is a sort of a series of conversations that will be made available on sort of the mass media about the difficult things, you know, of life, you know, diversity and racism and prejudice and those kinds of things. We are actually right in the middle of that right now, and towards the second half of October, it should be sort of in the public space. And 3 years ago, I wrote a book about eating. So it wasn't a cookbook. People who haven't bought the book still think it's a recipe book, but it's not a recipe book. 3 years ago, I wrote about eating and our habits and rituals around eating, and how we eat together and how we eat apart, and the power that lies in eating together. But there's something else brewing in that kind of space at the moment. And then just on a day-to-day basis, as a congregation as well as a church, we are trying to facilitate these things, any event or conversation that can bring people closer together, that can reconcile us as South Africans, because we are such a divided society still, as we all painfully know. If anybody wants to contact me, I think the best perhaps is on email. So the email address that can be used is Rudi, it's just my name, RUDI, at Andrew Murray, the name Andrew and the surname Murray, MURRAY.co.za. So it's just my name, Rudi, at andrewmurray.co.za. And I'll do my best. If I'm able to respond, I will do it as soon as I can.
Thank you very much, and all of the best with all your wonderful work and all the projects, and may it be blessed in abundance.
Thank you, Emma-Rensha, and to all your listeners and viewers too. May God bless you and be with you.
Thank you.